Healthcare is changing, and Dr. Nancy RN is here for you. The topics are many, but each program stands on its own with 3 key action points for you to learn. Your guide to a healthier you in a changing world. Dr. Nancy RN.
Welcome to Dr. Nancy RN, Healthy World, Healthy Nation, Healthy You. I'm Nancy Valentine, PhD and registered nurse, and this show is dedicated to you, the healthcare consumer. And in our series on autism, we wanted to speak with a person who has really had to deal with this firsthand, with a child of her own. And our guest today has a very special credential in this area because she is also an RN PhD, and her area is maternal child nursing. And I'd like to introduce our guest today, Dr. Kathleen Freeman. Kathleen is currently a nurse faculty member at the College of New Jersey, and she has spent most of her education in nursing education, previously at the University of Pennsylvania and Rutgers University Colleges of Nursing. Her background is, as I said, in maternal child nursing, and with a PhD, she certainly was very aware of children and children's issues before she had to confront this on her own terms with her child William, who is now 23 years old. But she spent a lot of time not only in nursing education, she gave her time to the school board of Haddonfield, New Jersey, and she also worked with a lot of committees at the Bancroft organization, a nonprofit organization in New Jersey as well. So she's really been able to share her experiences broadly with many people that have benefited from her expertise in being a mom. So we're going to be talking today about her journey through learning about autism and how her nursing background both helped to inform her and steer the care, but also helped her realize that this is a problem that needs to be solved for many people, not just her own child and family. So the title of our show today is Nurse, Family, Mom. Who's on first? The dilemma of gaining and maintaining life and role balance in caring for a child with autism.
Hi.
Kathleen, it's great to see you, and thank you so much for being here and being willing to share your story.
Thanks for having me. Hey.
You're welcome. So let's start out with your career 23 years ago and your family. You already had a child, a daughter.
Yes.
And so you had firsthand experience as a mom.
Yes.
And then you had the second child. Tell us about that.
Well, I had the second child when I was not working. I had taken some time off, and unfortunately, I had just taking a job when he was shortly before his second birthday at Rutgers in March, and I realized there was something wrong with him around May, and I had started a new position at Rutgers in the fall, and that was very difficult.
How old was he when you started noticing something?
I started noticing there was something wrong about 18 months. His grandmother, actually, who has hearing loss in the family, thought he may be deaf and was not responding to his name. But as a nurse, I unfortunately blew it off because I was able to assess that myself, and I knew he wasn't deaf.
Right.
But I did ask at his 18-month checkup with his pediatrician. He said, "Do you have any concerns?" I said, "Yeah, he is not talking." And the pediatrician said, "Can he hear?" And I said, "Yeah, I know he can hear."
Right.
And that was the end of the assessment.
Right. Now, I understand from other guests that thinking this could be a hearing loss is very common.
Absolutely. It is very common. And actually, that is the first thing they rule out when they are trying to get a diagnosis of autism. My son was evaluated that was May and June for hearing loss, and we ruled that out.
Right. So you already knew because you saw him responding
Yes.
to other things that he probably did not have a hearing
Right.
loss. But it was a smart thing to do to
Absolutely.
really have it.
Well, you want to
checked.
make sure there aren't any other underlying problems as well.
Right.
You want to make sure there's no medical problems that can mimic some of the autistic characteristics.
Now, did you see a change in your child? Was he talking previously and then suddenly it stopped? I mean, what would be the characteristics?
He did not have a lot of language. There are some children that have language and then it drops out. He did not have a lot of language, but people say the eye contact, he didn't have the eye contact. It's hard for me to look back and say he never had the eye contact. He was certainly giving eye contact to photographers and all his pictures. But around 18 months is when we really started to see a change in him.
Right. Now, you being a nurse, do you think that made a difference in your observation skills of looking at him at 18
Well,
months?
absolutely. When I was suspecting there was something wrong, I was looking at the peers, and my niece was a similar age, and it was the holiday time, and she had come to me and asked me for more milk, and I started to think, he does not do that. So I dug deeper. He had just been for his normal 2-year-old appointment with the pediatrician, who told me there was nothing wrong with him, and like I said, it was Easter. It was this time actually, and I noticed with my niece that she was doing things he was not. So I think parents can also look at their peer group and
Right.
look at other children that they're at the playground to kind of bounce off whether or not your child's doing similar things. Of course, we all know that kids do things at different developmental
Right.
ages slightly, but there are milestones. And what I was picking up was he was not meeting milestones.
But let's go back to your pediatrician. Did your pediatrician think he was? I mean, when he said he thought he was
He had
okay.
a normal 2-year-old checkup. And like I said, it was Easter time, and I had seen my niece, and being a nurse, and this is where the nursing comes in, I was trained in doing developmental, Denver developmental screening test. So I pulled that out and did one myself, and much of it is parent report. And I saw he is to the left, and when I say left, he had deficits in social and language. And I was, oh my God, he definitely has
Right.
developmental delay. And he had been to the pediatrician within a week.
Right. Now let's tell people what the Denver tool is. Explain that to people, because not many people are going to whip that out of their toolkit.
Well, no, but what you can do today is we have so many more resources on the web. And Autism Speaks, obviously, is one of the biggest organizations that have put out even videos. They have on their website, they have videos at different ages of typical kids and ones with autism. So you're able to compare
Right.
actually two children.
I think that's a really good resource that Kathleen just told us about. This organization, Autism Speaks, has really done some phenomenal, groundbreaking work, and we will have that on the website so that you can reference that. And I think it's really wonderful that these tools are so available and accessible to people, so they can really do what you did over 20 years ago. You had that knowledge because of your particular
We didn't have
training.
the internet 23 years ago like we do today. But you can also Google something called the MChat, which is what healthcare personnel use to screen in pediatrician offices, and it's a very simple 20-item questionnaire. And again, that is on the Autism Speaks website, and they actually will screen your child and tell you whether you need to pursue this.
Right. So this is really a step forward. I think and screening is so pivotal, because getting a diagnosis, as difficult as that may be, I'm sure you were shocked when you started even doing your own assessment to have to really confront that. But that is a very important first step. Is that correct?
Yes, and I think it is very difficult because autism has such a spectrum of different characteristics, and therefore your child may or may not have all the characteristics of autism, or the stereotypical characteristics. And that's when I brought that to my husband, for example, when I suspected there was something wrong. And in my book it said that they do this, they spin, they have problems with language. And my husband said, yes, but he doesn't do that, that, and that. You know, you can't diagnose him. You're not a doctor.
Right.
So I did pursue, and that's my first point. I really think parents, if you know there's something wrong, go and get the answer. Go have your child screened.
Right. So like Kathleen was saying, you know, you have to trust your gut. As difficult as it is maybe to wrap your mind around this initially, your gut is telling you that something is wrong, and she's saying you've got to pursue it. You can't deny it, put it aside, wait for something to change, because it's probably not going to change. It won't change.
Right.
This is a developmental disorder that does not go away. But having that opportunity to assess it, as we're saying, is really important.
But I think, exactly, and if you get early intervention and you get some services, the prognosis is so much better. So when you say it doesn't go away, well, with 30% of children that have autism, they make such strides that they no longer meet the diagnostic criteria for autism. But for many of the children, 70% say they still have characteristics of autism, but
Right.
maybe they're functioning at a much higher
Right.
level with
Right.
that intervention.
Right. I think that's a key point, because the intervention does matter.
Oh,
It's not
absolutely.
trivial.
No.
There may be an underlying cause, but for some people on this spectrum, that can have a profound difference
Absolutely.
in terms of their ability to function in day-to-day life, which is really the goal for all of us.
Right.
Is to really, tune up our functioning in day-to-day life.
Absolutely.
So what happened when you had to discuss this with your pediatrician, who was reassuring you that the child was normal? You were discussing this with your husband, who said, it doesn't necessarily make sense to me. I don't see all these things.
Well, this
in
is
our
where my
child."
nursing background really kicked in. And being with the child all day long, and your significant other, your husband, your spouse, often is in a job for 8 hours a day, and they're not with the child, so it is not facing them every minute of the
Right.
day, where if you're the caregiver, you cannot miss this.
Right.
You see it, and in your gut, you feel there's something wrong. So what I did is I made an appointment, and they said, "What are you here today? You were just here 2 weeks ago." And I said, "Developmental delay." And I said, "I think he has autism." And they're like, back 23 years ago, that wasn't something that they would give you a label. We were all afraid of labeling
Right.
our child or a child, even pediatricians, with some label that they'll carry with them for the rest of their life.
Right.
And back then, autism was not a very good label to give a child.
Right. And I think that's another really important point, the whole issue of labeling versus diagnosing and assessing. I think that we're stumbling over the label piece and missing the boat.
Right,
on
and
the
what I would say
assessment.
to parents is, don't be afraid of the label. If your child gets early intervention and gets it early, they could lose that label by the time they go to school, at least being classified. And what is wrong with having the label if it gives you services?
Right.
Our school districts, after the age of 3, is law to provide services for kids with developmental delays and difficulties. So get that intervention, and possibly by kindergarten, your child is integrated within a regular classroom. So it's important, even if it's not the right label,
Right.
it gives you access to services.
Right. I think that's a very important point, and you lived through it.
Yes.
So after you did go to the pediatrician, and did they get over the labeling piece? Did they do the assessment?
Well, I told them I wanted them to send me to the best doctor they could, and so they sent me to a neurologist who gave me the label of pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified, PDNOS. And at that time, I have to say, I really wasn't clear on what that really meant. It really wasn't till about 6 months later when I went to St. Chris and went to another developmental pediatrician. And developmental pediatricians are one of the best healthcare professionals to see with autism, and they see this every day. Clearly explained to me PDNOS is sort of more a milder form of autism, if you want to say that. But what was key to me was the treatment is the same. Whether your kid's mild or severe, the treatment is basically the same, and you need to access that in order to make improvements. So,
Right.
and that was very important,
Right.
and that I kept seeking out the answers that I needed.
That is very good. I mean, you obviously had a mission, and you were on that mission.
Sure.
In terms of developmental pediatricians, can you tell us about what that entails and how people will access those individuals? Because I assume they're not all over the place. You have to go search them out.
Well, your major medical facilities in Philadelphia definitely have departments of developmental pediatrics. Unfortunately, right now there's a long waiting list because people are suspecting that there are issues because of the wonderful awareness that has been done. And CHOP may be in 9 months to a year in order to get in to see a developmental pediatrician. But I would encourage them to seek out their local school district after the age of 3. There is things called Child Find, which is required by school districts to find children with developmental delays and seek out services. But the key thing is identifying it and having it diagnosed in order to access the services.
Well, that's really important. Let's explore that a little further, because nobody who has this sense in their gut that something is wrong is going to be willing to wait 6 months to a year for an appointment at a renowned organization like the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. That is just not a good plan. So you're saying, are there alternative ways to get
you can call your local
diagnosis?
school district and ask for an evaluation. And it's even better to put it in writing. So email them and have a written request that you are requesting an evaluation for your child. Therefore, you have a date, because there are federal laws and then there's state laws. The states have to follow the federal law, and each state has their own guidelines as to when you request that evaluation and when it has to be done. So that is an avenue for parents as well.
How about very young children that may not even be in the school system yet?
Before age 3, the federal government has early intervention programs. So your pediatrician can make a referral. Even without that diagnosis, if we suspect developmental delay, you can get your pediatrician to refer you to early intervention, and the federal government then it's a sliding scale, and you are able to get services through that.
And where would these services typically be in a community? Where would they
Sometimes
actually be
they're
housed?
with schools that have services for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and some are affiliated with hospitals. So you can access that probably through your local government.
Right.
Really.
So there really are 3 pathways, as I'm hearing, 3 different ways that you can access these services early. You can either go to a developmental pediatrician. If your child is in a school system, you can write your wish to have that child evaluated, as Kathleen has prompted us to do. And thirdly, if your child is very young and not in any school system yet, you can have your regular pediatrician help you access services in the community. And all of these pathways are really leading to the same end, and that is to get the child evaluated and get an expert opinion on what that child's condition is in order to start the planning process for what the next steps are.
Right.
Okay, so back to your developmental pediatrician. What did that person have to say?
Well, that hit me like a ton of bricks, for sure, when I got that diagnosis. And
even though you already knew it.
I already knew. Yeah, I already knew, because it validated it.
Right.
And my maternal child health background helped me in that I had taken care of premature infants previously, and I knew that this was a loss for me, that many of my hopes and dreams for my son may never come true. So therefore, I was going to go through the stages of grief, as well as my spouse. And the things that I was taught in nursing school about going through the stages of grief and how you might not go through it together, and you may reach acceptance before your spouse or before your significant other, was key, because you're with them every day. You move through denial pretty quickly, where the dad or your spouse may not see what you see every day.
Right.
And it's hard because grandparents sometimes don't want to accept it, but people in your family may say, oh no, they're just, especially boys, they don't talk as quickly as girls.
So they start rationalizing the behavior.
They do.
Right.
So, but like I said, my background as a nurse really helped me with even my relationship with my husband at that time, because I knew I had to wait for him to catch up.
Right. So I think what Kathleen is saying to us is that you and your significant other significant family members do go through grief and grieving together, but they may not be at the same stages of that process all at the same time. There are people that will linger in the denial phase a lot longer because it's just so much more difficult and emotionally painful to really understand what the consequences of all this means, and really just hoping it will somehow magically go away.
Yeah, that's true.
So how did you help your other family members, in addition to really helping yourself to really, again, come to terms with the reality of this?
Well, as far as my husband, sometimes I think just spending more time with the child helps move them through denial. And
so you offered your opportunity for your husband to spend more
take
time with William.
That's exactly right. I told him to go to the playground. But also he allowed me to do the research, but I think my next point was as far as your spouse and family, you have to maintain those relationships. When you have a diagnosis of autism and you're the caregiver, primary caregiver, you want to do everything you can. And if you make that child the sole focus of your life, you will lose the relationships around you. So what we did things like date night. We did things to keep the marriage together, because the worst thing for your child with autism is to lose the structure of the family and the support. So therefore, I made sure I worked on my marriage, and I also did what I told young parents in postpartum, that when you have a newborn, is make sure that you take care of the sibling, and that the sibling gets attention, because that sibling is going to feel the attention you're giving that child. So you can't make that child the sole focus of your life, or you'll lose the people around you.
That must be so hard to do, because when you realize what is happening with your child and the vulnerability that comes along with all of that.
It's hard.
It must be so hard not to spend all of your time trying to help the child in some way.
Well, I was working on my dissertation, and I have to say, when I was over at Penn's Library, was spending some time looking up things I could do for him when I was supposed to be working on my dissertation.
Right.
For sure.
Well, you had a lot on your plate.
At one time, when I had him, I was a full-time student at the University of Maryland. I had him in April, and I was just finishing up all the coursework for my PhD. And I was also teaching at the College of New Jersey. And so, and I was also mom. So I did find that was a little overwhelming after his diagnosis, that I did give up teaching for a while. And that is quite common with families with autism, that it is difficult for two breadwinners, and I applaud the people who have, both of them working. I was fortunate enough that I was able to stay home and be that warrior mom and do the research and work to get the services that he needed, and that's why now I do try to reach out to other parents and try to help them. Right.
Well, you certainly have, and certainly doing this show is a tremendous contribution to other people. The fact that you finished your PhD with all this going on at home is really a tremendous accomplishment.
Well, like I said, I did give up my nursing education career at that time to focus on finishing my PhD, because I knew I would not have a nursing education career if I didn't finish that, because it's a terminal degree in your field is ideal. So I could do two things well. I had difficulty doing three things well.
Right. Well, that's more than most people. But it also says that your husband had to be a great support to you, and other family members. So reinforcing that whole idea that part of the magic here, if there is such a thing, is keeping that family structure not only together, but reinforcing it and making it stronger, because you're definitely going to need that as you have demonstrated. So your husband had to be a great support to you.
My husband was wonderful. My husband was a great provider. He made things easier for me and he recognizes that we both are different, and he recognizes me with someone with a PhD that is used to researching a problem and finding the answers, that's what I needed to do. I needed to go to conferences. I needed to go and find what I needed to do for him. And one of the things I think I also wanted to make a point of is that you can't do it all yourself.
Right.
And you also have to take care of yourself. And one of the best advice I ever got was 10 simple things a day. Do 10 simple things a day for yourself so you don't feel neglected, because a lot of times you're pulled in lots of different directions.
Right.
So
10 seems like a lot. Can you give us an example?
Oh, just reading the paper, taking some time to read the paper, or watching your favorite TV program that you taped. Just finding a little bit of time. I mean, I seem simple. I mean, not even time consuming, but things that you feel that you weren't neglected.
Right.
So, because if you're not available for yourself, you're not going to be available for them. If you don't feel good about yourself, you're not going to be available for your family. Right. So that was another thing, because that's the same advice I gave new parents with a new baby.
Right. So you were following the same great steps in how to be a successful parent, period, especially with a newborn. and maybe with your child having these developmental issues, you felt like you were already caring for a newborn and a child that was going to have more dependency for a longer period of time.
And you have to focus on that other child. What we did, things like, we called it, her name is Rebecca, and we had Rebecca days, and we would pull her out of school, and when she was young, we'd take her to the circus. And he couldn't go. William wasn't allowed to go to Rebecca. This was Rebecca Day where she had mom and dad to herself, and we pulled her out of school, made it very special, and took her to the circus. Later on, she loved Broadway plays, so we took her to Broadway plays. And they were her days. And on Sundays, my husband would take her to church and then go to breakfast and spend that time with her and have one-on-one time with her. And when she had a half day at school, I was able to sneak away for a little while, and we would go to lunch in a little tea shop, and that was her time. So we really focus on the sibling as well.
That's nice. I think for people that are listening to this with other siblings, it really doesn't mean that you have to take them to places that are expensive or not accessible. Just time. It could be time playing a game. It could be time just having a chat. I love the idea of really labeling that time or that day with the other child's name. I think that's really smart, because that really helps to reinforce the whole goal of doing this.
Right. When she was in high school, and she had a performance in choir, just choir, and I would make sure I would get a babysitter. And she's like, "Oh, you really don't have to go." And I'm like, "I'm going, because it's important that I'm there for you." So, and it has helped, and she's matured into a wonderful adult.
That's wonderful.
Who cares?
So I think that what we've heard today from Kathleen Freeman is how to be successful in being a parent of a child with autism. I don't know what the statistics are with families that are negatively impacted, meaning divorce, other related problems with other siblings, but it sounds like whatever that statistic is, you were able to sort of bypass that.
Well, the research really doesn't show that there's a significant higher rate of autism, of divorce with parents with autism, but we do know with any marriage, when you have two parents who have been raised differently, come together and are trying to parent a child, whether they're autistic or they're typical, that there are differences, and those differences can create stress. And stress obviously can interfere with the marriage. So, of course, I don't think it's unique to autism, but certainly with parents.
I think that's one of the things that I've gotten out of really meeting Kathleen and listening to her story. So many of the things that she did because of her nursing background could be adopted by anyone without a nursing background. But because of her education and her insight and awareness of how these factors play, it's really important that she sort of kept on track. Even though she had a child that was going to definitely be more demanding over the course of a lifetime, she did not lose focus. She was able to use those really good principles of relationship building, family reinforcement, taking care of the sibling, and most importantly, taking care of herself. So she didn't get lost in the equation. I think is really, really an important message for people that are listening who maybe are dealing with a child with autism or a child with other kinds of related issues where it's a very demanding course, something that you didn't exactly sign up for when you got into this, and then suddenly are confronted with a lifetime of additional challenges. So I think that it's really a very positive story, Kathleen, and a very wonderful experience in terms of how to do something that's hard very successfully.
But you need to know what you need to do. You really do. You have to do your homework. You can't just rely on the school district or on your pediatrician. You, as a parent with a child with autism, needs to know what needs to be done for your child, because it can't just be done in a school. It has to be carried out throughout their whole life.
I think that's the best message we could end on, and that is, it's all about you, and you taking control and you being in charge of your health, wellness, and the course of your life. So I want to thank our guest today, Dr. Kathleen Freeman, and I want to thank you, the viewers, for being with us and spending time listening to her story and imparting this information to others that you know that may benefit from this. So remember, with health, all things are possible. Have a wonderful day. I hope you enjoyed our conversation today and that the information will help you in meeting your health goals. Catch this program and other conversations on the website, drnancyrn.com. Or you can write to me as well. I welcome your comments and feedback. Thank you for listening and join us again. And remember, with health, all things are possible.